Good morning, everyone. As is always inevitable for me after a few days of spending time with everyone, I'm losing my voice. So the good news for you guys is that means that these introductions are going to be really brief. A couple housekeeping announcements before we get started this morning. We have a nice pair of glasses that have been found, so if you're missing your glasses, they will move out to the registration desk in a few minutes. Additionally, when you walked in this morning, you were handed a survey by the nice Cisco ladies at the door. That's a survey that we really use extensively here at the ISP Summit to figure out what we want to do for next year, what's working, what's not working, and we really value the feedback that comes from that. And as a result, the completed survey becomes your ballot for a brand new iPad Air. So please take the time to fill out those surveys. They will be available up until lunch from the registration desk if you somehow missed one. Please get them handed in by the end of lunch, and at the end of the day, we will be doing the draw for the iPad Air. As long as you fill out your name and everything correctly, you do not need to be present to win. So, moving right along, our first speaker this morning is Mark Kummer from Cisco. Mark is the Vice President of Service Providers for Canada, responsible for all sales for Cisco's service provider business in Canada, serving telecommunications service providers, cable companies, internet service providers, wireless providers, and utilities. Mark holds a bachelor's degree in engineering from King's College of the University of London and a master's degree in engineering from the London University Imperial College. He is a 20-year veteran of the information technology and communications industry. Please join me in welcoming Mark Kummer.
I use the internet for everything.
I now do all my banking online.
I like connecting to my friends.
Watching movies, catching up on news.
I use it to watch Netflix.
Being able to communicate with people from all over the world at any time.
I don't have to miss Easter just because I'm out of town. I can just video chat and it's like I'm there.
The internet is how I met my wife.
Well, I've been on Senior Singles a few times.
I'm learning Japanese and Spanish online.
I take a math course.
I carved my own bow and arrow just out of looking at a YouTube video.
Without the internet, I probably couldn't function.
Like, just imagine it. Like, no Netflix, no YouTube, no Google. It wouldn't be nice.
Picture this.
In 10 years, I'd like to live in a house that knows when I'm home.
As soon as you get in your driveway, you can press a button and everything kind of just goes on and gets ready for you.
In 10 years, I can envision a network where automobiles and GPS and computers and the internet are all working together.
Our lifespans within 10 years, I think, are going to increase dramatically.
I'd like to see the ability to do medical diagnosis just by standing in front of my computer.
It's going to be around you everywhere. It's going to be part of the class, the household, part of your everyday objects.
As a result, we're going to be more connected to everyone.
I think 10 years from now, hopefully, the whole world could be connected. That would be amazing. I think that the world kind of becomes smaller, and I think that smaller sense of the world can be a good thing.
Good morning. Good morning. Fantastic. Whenever I watch videos like that, and working for Cisco, I watch them fairly frequently. I always think, wow, what an exciting time we're living in. And some of that sounds way out in the future, but it's now. And we really are in a very exciting time. Actually, coming and talking to a group like this is fantastic because actually you're the people who are enabling that, and you're right at the front of that, closest to those customers and those people that are using the internet that's changing their lives. This morning, to kick things off today, I really wanted to speak 35, 45 minutes just to talk a little bit about market transitions and what that means to the industry. I know, from the business that I'm in, we look very closely at transitions taking place in the market, because major transitions are typically when companies can take advantage of that, spot it early, and actually better themselves as a business in the industry. There's also a plethora of cases actually where companies miss transitions or are slow to react to major market transitions, and that can have a very negative impact on their business. And so what I wanted to do this morning is just take a bit of time and talk through a few major trends or market transitions that we're seeing in the industry. Some of them actually won't be a surprise. They're things that you deal with day in, day out. But I wanted to take some time talking about those, talking about the impact of those, and finally, just to make some suggestions on the things that perhaps we should be thinking about as an industry as we plan our business and our networks over the next year, 2, 3 years. So today, I'm going to talk about some market transitions. One of them in particular, which is emerging and still relatively new, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on, and then talk a little bit about some things that we can do to prepare ourselves. And if I look at the transitions that I'm going to focus on, or the market trends, there's going to be no surprises there. IP traffic growth. We hear that week in, week out, year in, year out, is growing dramatically. Cloud, probably one of the most overused terms. Video, mobility, and then this thing on the end, machine to machine. And that's something that's emerging now. It's happening now, but I think we believe that that's going to have a major impact on us as an industry. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about that. Before I kick off, I just wanted to make a little point about Canada. Now, if we look at the data points specifically for Canada, actually Canada is right out, especially in terms of the consumers, is right out at the front of this wave. We are typically in Canada early adopters. And in fact, all the stats and the figures we look at, our consumers cannot get enough of the internet and technology change. It's actually not quite the case for business, when we're actually a little bit lagging, but from a consumer perspective, we're right out there. And so all of the things that I'll be talking about this morning are very, very relevant to Canada as a country and our business. The other point that I wanted to just make before we kick off is I'll reference a number of data points as we go through, and the majority of those are actually data points that we've generated within Cisco, research that we do on a regular basis to look at the industry and identify trends, either our own research or working with research houses. So one, it's data that we believe in and we've tracked over a number of years. And also the Canadian data is actually Canadian data. So often, when I look at planning and look at the industry, you see North American data and they take 12%, say that's how Canada looks. Well, actually, that's not quite the same. So this is mainly Canadian data. So first market transition, this is the one that we're probably all familiar with, even looking in some of the demo suites out there. There's a lot of discussion around how we better handle and cope with the explosion in IP traffic growth. And we do a VNI survey every year, as we call it, a Visual Networking Index, and it's really trying to understand how that traffic growth is projected. And if I look at the figures over the past 3 years, both from 2010, 2011, 2012, it consistently projects growth going out for the next 5 or 6 years. But actually, for North America, we've always thought that will probably slow because North America is more at the forefront. So it'll continue growing, but not quite at such the same pace. One thing that surprises us consistently, and actually surprised us again this year, is that the growth in North America is actually faster than we previously projected. So there's no slowing of that growth as far as we can see. And the current figures that we're looking at is talking about around about a threefold increase in IP traffic volumes between now and 2017. And actually that's probably something that we've underestimated. Another aspect of that, if we look at that total volume, is the bulk of it, as you can see, and actually slightly increasing going out, appears to be consumer-based services. So that's the services that you all sell to consumers, individuals. And that's definitely, as I said a few minutes ago, Canada is right out at the leading edge there, and the consumers are the lion's share of that traffic. We shouldn't underestimate the business piece though, because businesses are very important, and actually I think that is being dramatically underestimated in the future, because at the moment, if I look at the Canadian businesses, most of the traffic we're accounting for is realistically email, a little bit of web traffic and some voice over IP. There's no significant heavy applications being used that really drive significant amounts of traffic over the internet. And I think that over the next few years will change and will probably drive the growth overall of traffic faster. It's also an opportunity for us as a group working with that set of business customers. So traffic volumes continue to grow, they seem to be accelerating, and I suspect we've underestimated this because there'll be new consumer applications and businesses, I think, will take up some of these services faster. Cloud, a term that's used across the industry, and it has been for the past several years. One of the things that surprised us when we were looking at the data points around cloud is that actually the amount of network traffic that's being consumed by cloud applications was actually far bigger than we thought it was, because much of that is unseen. And if we go into the detailed analysis, cloud is driving far more network utilization than we originally thought. And that shouldn't really be a surprise. If you look at it from a business perspective, cloud's a pretty compelling message. If you're a business, moving workloads into the cloud makes economic sense. Whether that's a business application, ERP, for example, whether it's a big service provider moving intelligence from an expensive set-top box in the home, moving that into the cloud and reducing the price or the size of the device, the client in the home, makes economic sense. It's easy to manage. Or whether it's even a service provider with their network, still having devices, building their network, but moving some of the functionality of those devices away from them into a data center somewhere to make them less expensive and less costly to manage. It makes economic sense. And we're seeing a lot of that in these areas across the industry. We're talking about network virtualization, even CPE virtualization. So it makes compelling sense. From a consumer, I can list endless examples of why consumers are using cloud. I'm sure all of us use it day in, day out, including myself. Another aspect of cloud that's becoming increasingly important, and actually I think it's going to be an opportunity for this group, is that the application providers, the people who actually write the applications for the cloud, actually are increasingly aware of the network. Because when they're writing applications and developing and innovating, the network is in the middle of what they're trying to do. And unless they're aware of that network and the capabilities of that network, it limits what they can do. Actually, similarly, for the average customer, consumer, we become increasingly aware of the network. If I want to use iCloud, I'm conscious of whether I'm in a building somewhere using Wi-Fi or whether I'm roaming in the US and I've got to mount up significant charges, you start to become aware of the network. And that's actually a good thing and a bad thing. We can take advantage of that, or it can play against us. And in fact, to try and quantify that somewhat, we try to take, this is very simplistic, but take 3 categories of application. Basic, you can see the examples there, email, instant messaging, and some standard definition video, music. Through an intermediate category, video chat, conferencing, simple Skype, HD video, music streaming, and then through to some what we call advanced applications, virtual office, high definition business collaboration, super HD entertainment, which is just starting to come into the mind of consumers and us as providers. So those 3 categories, and looked at it over fixed network infrastructure. And if you look at this, it shows actually Canada was reasonably well placed. And this is an industry that's invested pretty well into our infrastructure in terms of low latency, which is one of the key criteria to service these applications, and bandwidth availability. Now, one point I'd make here is this is just to give you a term of, or give us a term of reference, because we're only talking about one concurrent application. So one person in a home watching a Super HD video may just about work. But as soon as you have multiple things going on in the home or in the business, suddenly that paradigm changes completely. And so it's really just to give a term of reference. More significantly, if you look at in terms of mobile access, again, for a single concurrent application, we're somewhere in the middle. Again, actually doing well compared to the US. It's better latency and higher bandwidth. Actually, that's not a surprise. Canada has led in terms of deploying high-speed mobile networks. We were there early with LTE, and you can get a pretty comprehensive service. But it's still, in terms of cloud applications, there's a way to go there. So, just from the cloud perspective, I think the key message here is cloud is becoming more and more compelling. And from a network perspective, it has a significant impact on the network. Consumers and customers are becoming more aware of the network. It makes them more aware. And also the application providers are very aware now of network capability. And I think there's an opportunity there to actually, one, benefit from providing customers with an advantage by using your services. And secondly, those application providers, there's an opportunity there in terms of helping them understand what's going on in the network and what capabilities that they can use when they're developing applications. Video, third case. Again, I don't suppose many people will be surprised if we say that video is becoming increasingly common in every interaction and transaction that's taking place on the internet. As most of you will know, video is a pretty heavy traffic to transport. It takes up a lot of bandwidth capacity. It's also a highly sensitive payload. It's sensitive to jitter, latency. And so an increasing amount of the network traffic that you're carrying is video, which is a difficult traffic or difficult payload for you to carry. And that's something we need to be aware of. And if we look out and the overall growth I was talking about in point number 1, a lot of that is being fueled by video. And in fact, where I said we expected North America to slow in terms of acceleration, slightly, but it's actually going faster than we thought. The biggest single driver for that is video. and it's consumers downloading internet, video on demand, Netflix, etc., from their providers. That is the biggest single driver of the overall traffic growing faster than we thought. And in fact, again, here you can see the business element is still relatively small. I know if I look at the business customers that we talk to on a regular basis, there's an increasing appetite for looking at video-based collaboration and video-based technology. And I think that, again, that's going to have a larger impact on that going forward. So, in terms of video, increasing part of the network traffic. In fact, for consumers, I reckon 63% of all network traffic will be video-based by 2017, and for businesses about 49%. That's the figures we see. So it's a huge part of the overall traffic is going to be video, and we need to be aware of that. But again, if we're aware of that, we can turn that into a benefit for our customers and for our businesses. Oops. The fourth point, which mobile, wireless, is the fastest growing by a long way of any network technology. It's exploding, and no surprise. You know, if for years we've been talking about our customers want to have access any place, anytime, anywhere, and that's the reality. I assume most of us now never really consider when we're on the move whether we can get access to our information, to the web, to video chat with somebody. That's starting to become, you expect to be able to do that anywhere. And that's taking its toll. And it's driving up massive mobile growth. A few points around that. If we look at the figures that we are specifically seeing around growth in mobile traffic, and we look at the amount of access spectrum that's available, the two don't work. There's a point where that spectrum's finite. It's the physics. There's limits to how much you can do with that spectrum. And so we will reach a point at the current growth rates that the two don't work together. And so one of the things that we're seeing a real shift at the moment in thinking is around offload strategies. And I know, talking to many of the providers here in Canada that operate mobile networks, offload was a lesser consideration 2 years ago. Now it's starting to become the forefront as these traffic levels grow so fast. It's also a consideration because it has implications on other parts of their network and the capacity of their network. And the other area that mobile has a big impact on is signaling in their networks. Because the more and more devices that we're all using, and the more and more interactions that we're having, that suddenly drives up a significant amount of signaling traffic on their network. And also a significant amount of potential compute. Because a lot of that signaling is moving away from dedicated devices to virtualized programs running in data centers. And again, actually, that's an opportunity. There's a big virtualization opportunity in this business. Looking specifically at offload, for Canada, we're saying that if you look at the research that we've done, looking at traffic patterns, no surprise, the bulk of actual traffic is driven from the home or a venue, whether that venue is an auditorium, a stadium, a shopping mall, an airport. So those are the typical areas that are driving significant amounts of traffic. And our predictions from the research we've done said that 70% of that traffic will be offloaded by 2017. So offload strategies around Wi-Fi, femto, pico, really important. And we shouldn't underestimate the extra amounts of signaling and compute and opportunity that is around that, because all those devices handing off between different networks, it starts to become quite complicated, and there is an opportunity in there for businesses. Internet of Everything, fifth area, and probably the one that's potentially going to have the biggest impact on us as an industry. It's emerging now, and in this category I would include machine to machine, as that's commonly referred to. If we take Internet of Everything, from the paradigm we've come from, person to person, that's typically phone calls, emails, direct, I send you an email, I send you a picture, I have an instant message conversation with you. That's growing significantly. But it's at people speed. There's a limited amount of those interactions that I can do in a day. Now, I know some of my younger colleagues do more of that than I do, but there's still a limited amount that I can actually do. We're starting to see significant amounts now of person to thing communications. And in its simplest form, I regularly will set my PVR at home to record something. In the future, maybe that will be in the cloud, but I'll set my PVR at home to record something using my mobile device. That's becoming fairly common. I know a number of my colleagues have security systems at home that they monitor and interact with using their mobile devices. So the number of interactions between people and things is growing. I think that's going to be a trend that we see significant growth from. The Internet of Everything, though, is slightly different, because that's when we talk about things talking to things without people being involved. And whether it's person to person or person to thing, that's at a person's speed. It's governed by the number of those interactions that we can carry out. As soon as we start talking about machine to machine, then we have potentially many more connected devices, which is one factor. The other factor is there's programs running on those devices, triggering events. And that's at machine speed. And suddenly we can move into a paradigm where you've got many-fold more connected devices, all of which are generating almost, unquantifiable amount of extra interactions. And so that's a whole different paradigm that we're moving into. And I think the internet is in the middle of that. That is going to have a significant impact on our business. Firstly, from just the actual architecture of those interactions, and from a network perspective, moving from potentially from several, maybe a few years ago, a very centralized approach to a decentralized. Now, that's very distributed. Those interactions are any to anywhere, and it can be using compute and programs, workloads running in data centers at any place. That's a very different paradigm. And also, it means that there has to be, the only way this will scale, and the only way that we can manage that as an industry, otherwise the costs will explode, service levels will degrade. The only way we can do that is if there's a closed loop between the compute and the network and the application, and they're working together. It can't be based on someone sat at an operator terminal provisioning resources manually. There has to be a closed loop. Otherwise, this will not scale. And this is probably the area in the industry at the moment where there's the most discussion. What does this actually mean? It also means we have to have bandwidth, compute, and control working together. So, Internet of Everything. There's many examples that we can talk about, but just to give a bit of a scale around this. At the moment, from the things, and this isn't within the realms of some reality, looking at these types of things that we think will be connected to the internet at some point, without being silly, because there is lots of opportunity to be very extreme with this, but looking at things that we think will be connected to the internet at some point, we're currently at probably about 1% of things that we think within our understanding of the internet will be connected. Just 1%. Even if that goes to 10%, that's a massive change. I know in Canada, we're predicting in the next, between now and 2017, for each individual, not that we all have these connected things, but just as a way of quantifying it, there'll be around about 9 connected devices. And that's hundreds of millions of connected devices, and I think that's an underestimate. So there's some applications that have started to become established. Smart offices, walking into the office, your badge as you go in identifies who you are, security can track where you are, lighting and heating can be controlled as you move through a building. That's starting to become a fairly common thing, and that technology is moving to the internet rather than some of the more legacy-based systems. Industry is starting to adopt it in the areas where it's been practical, especially relating to fulfillment, supply chain, maintenance, inspection. We're starting to see devices talking to devices. The area I think is going to have the biggest impact are some of the emerging ones, and they're the ones that it's quite hard to quantify, and we haven't really built into some of our calculations, and that's things like agriculture. Now, a lot of that is really governed by cost, and it's Moore's law. The cost of some of these sensors and devices is dropping dramatically, and things that I felt was rather a little bit out there, if that's the correct expression. I saw an example a few months ago of organisations that I know as a business we're talking to in the US that are developing sensors for the agriculture industry. And realistically, it's getting to the cost point that we can have sensors that are mobile connected for less than $1 that you can put in the soil, in the earth of a field that will automatically measure moisture, nutrients, and feed that back. And now, that sounds a bit far-fetched, but that's actually reality. Those sensors are now getting the price points coming down. And as soon as you think about that, the opportunities and the number of connected devices suddenly start to explode. And if you look at a country like Canada, it's very much a resource-based economy, that could be very significant, and we could play a significant role within that. Healthcare, smart health, internet-based health, it's something that's referenced fairly commonly, but actually it's probably the industry that's got the most to gain from it, and it's probably in one of the worst places right now because it's horribly unconnected. And if you think about assisted living, remote diagnostics, medicine trials, first responder activity. We've seen, we show videos of first responders collecting someone, paramedics racing through a city, and that vehicle automatically communicating with the traffic management of the city, changing signals to allow the vehicle to go through. Sounds a bit far-fetched, but actually that's not that far away. So I think the whole industry, there's a whole amount of emerging areas that are going to be really interesting and have a major impact on us as businesses. That also means that business models need to change from a service provider, internet service provider, and industry perspective. And me talking to you about this sort of stuff is sort of, I'm talking to the experts here, but we come from an industry that's effectively, in the past, very much around bandwidth and price. You want to deliver capacity, the best internet capability at the lowest price, and make a good profit from that. Your customers want to buy the best capability at the lowest price, and it's a price per bit type of discussion. And that really has evolved, and if you look at our current situation, it's about the bundle. And increasingly, we want to sell bundles to our customers because it gives us more revenue, more ARPU, makes it more sticky. Now, you're less likely to move to another provider if you've got multiple services with one provider. That's all industry norm stuff that we've been talking about for years. Currently, we're in a position where some agility to actually prioritize some of those services and give individuals more of a personalized service is seen as a benefit. And that's pretty much where we are now as an industry. I think as we move forward into a world of Internet of Everything, that changes slightly and the whole paradigm changes. And actually, whether we're talking about energy providers interacting machine to machine, thing to thing with homes or with industry, suddenly there's a whole load of interactions taking place, both network, compute, and various combinations. And actually, the organizations that are sat right in the middle of that, enabling that, is us, this community. And there's a growing opportunity being sat in the middle of that to start to make some degree of awareness to those customers of what's going on in the network and give them some degree of ability to actually interface with that network, get information from it, analytics, and actually program back into it. And if the companies, the providers that can start to enable that and open up that network and play a role in the middle of this, that's where the business models were going to come from in the future. And we're seeing this. These conversations are taking place with ISPs and service providers regularly now. It's a common area of conversation in terms of how providers see their business changing and growing in the future. In terms of revenue from this, these figures, it's very hard to quantify, but these figures are based on examples that we know are coming or are available now, looking at the way we would expect those to grow over the next decade. Actually, these data points are not Canada specific, they're actual global data points. But they're figures based on what we understand now, based on projected growth. I think the opportunity coming out of these industries for us to provide services to them, whether it's to consumer in the home or whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, especially relevant in Canada, and the resource-based industries, mining, petrochem, agriculture, I think there's a big opportunity there. So a point slightly stepping out of the main theme of the presentation, but one other point I wanted to talk about here relating to business rather than consumer. Canada historically has been a little bit challenged in terms of innovation and productivity. And there's loads and loads of data points around that. And I know in many forums that I attend, that's a topic of discussion, how we can accelerate innovation and productivity, especially in comparison with other G8, G11 economic countries. And that's actually very much related to the use of technology. And in fact, if you look at the large businesses, the big enterprises in Canada, they do pretty well. If you're a big bank, they typically use technology and they're pretty close to the forefront. And they get a lot of support. There's loads of companies, including us, that are very keen to give them lots of support and sell them lots of services. And they're pretty good at adopting it. The challenge is in Canada, 99% of the economy is mid, 100 to 500 employee, or small, sub 100 employee organisations. And they are very slow at having the confidence to adopt these technologies and use the internet. In fact, 93% of all Canadian SMEs are actually connected to the internet. They just don't use it for much. They use it for very basic functions. And I think, sort of stepping out of context, but I think it's a real opportunity for us, as most of those smaller businesses trust, they'd much rather work with the smaller ISP than work with the big service providers, the big national names. And it's an opportunity for us. Looking at the importance of cloud, looking at the importance of what the internet can enable from business, it's a real opportunity for us as a group to try and help them accelerate that and make them more productive and increase innovation. It's almost a good thing that we're here because there's an opportunity ahead that we can help these businesses. And actually, we've largely got a lot of the infrastructure in place. We're at the leading edge in terms of consumer services. We just need to do a better job in helping these small businesses use this technology. So, in terms of the things that we should be thinking about and what we can be doing, how we're planning our networks. Actually, I consider myself a Canadian now. I've been here a few years. You can tell from the English accent, so I have to be careful using a hockey analogy because I think I can be included in that group now, but I know a number of people think I'm only interested in soccer, which is not the case. So what can we do? I think, firstly, if we look at where we are now, there's still the norm is to consider silos. A new application coming along, okay, what's the sort of network capacity we're going to need for that? Speak to the service provider, provision that amount of capacity, internet capacity, yeah. And actually look at how much compute, storage we're going to need. Do we need to put some new servers in our own data center, in our own facility? Or do we need to buy some data center resource from a, IaaS provider? That's pretty much how it is. It's very manual, in silos, operation staff sat at terminals, provisioning it. So that's not particularly efficient and optimized way to use those resources, especially as most of those resources, for parts of the time, are largely unutilized. If you look at most servers in data centers, they're still only at about 20% utilization. So isn't there a smarter way that we can use those resources? Well, the first thing is we really have to bring these together to optimize. So we have this mesh up, a combination of compute, storage, network, and applications. They're all aware of each other, and we can better utilize the total capacity that's there rather than operate in silos for specific applications. And then it's really, really important, as I mentioned earlier, that is a closed loop environment where the applications can draw information from the network and the data center to know what's available where and what they can utilize, and actually push actions back into those resources, change configurations, change routes, change where workloads are being driven. And actually, fundamentally, how we see this between now and not too far in the distance is a high performance fabric, highly flexible. And in that fabric, we have compute storage network, all tightly integrated, and then a common platform that sits over that to provide a common operational model that's aware of all those resources. And where it's relevant, significant parts of that being virtualized. Moving that more into the types of networks we're more used to seeing. So that mesh framework of a network with computing resources, routers, switches, fiber optics, often many of those functions being virtualized. We see that as the foundation of this future architecture. One thing though that's vital for this is that each of those devices need to be open. And they need to open up interfaces that provide both analytical information up and allow programmability down into those devices to tell them how they need to be configured and how they need to operate. And that's very different to how we've been in the past. I know the industry is, every vendor, including ourselves, is working to open up interfaces into all of their technologies. And that's been driven by, it's very common now to talk to customers about software-defined networks. This is where it's all, this is what it's about. All of these devices are being opened up in terms of interfaces. And that enables the information to be passed up to a layer above that's providing orchestration, analytics, and management. Closed loop with the network. Analytical information coming up, being analyzed, and commands being pushed back down. And actually, where we are right now, there's a number of silos within that. So if I look at access technology, and one that I'm somewhat aware of, we had an example just this year in February at the Super Bowl. Big provider, AT&T actually, in their mobile network. Typically, that's a very challenging environment. You've got 100,000 people in a stadium all wanting to use devices. Typically, and previously, they would make a configuration change to their macro radio network and their network prior to the event, based on what they expect from experience to take place. And then maybe halfway through, they'd make another set of manual changes based on the actual reality of that event. This year, in February, for the first time, they actually used this type of model. And they took analytical data out of those devices real time and provide configuration changes programmatically back to the network real time. And they made tens of thousands of automated configuration changes throughout the event without any user intervention. And the user experience was significantly improved. Now that's a silo. Where we're working now as an industry is trying to link all of this together, so it isn't just about talking about an access technology, it's taking information out of the network, and how can you then have an integrated capability to orchestrate across all those resources, and then provide interfaces from that control layer up to applications. And that can be a grand, big platform, or it can be providers like yourselves can look at instances where you can use elements of this to take information from the network, build the right tools with the analytics and orchestration ability, then to provide APIs, programming interfaces up to application providers and businesses so they can actually better utilize those resources. And that's a business. And that's an evolving business for service providers and ISPs. But this is where the industry's going. And all of it pretty much is based on open standards. And this is where the industry has to go. And there's many industry forums now where these standards are being formalized, application providers are building into it, whether it's the big ones like Microsoft or whether it's small ones. This is where the industry is going, and there's a value in there for service providers. So just a few closing thoughts. Some major market transitions, and many of them I'm sure were not a surprise. There may be a few bits of information in there that you hadn't considered or hadn't thought, but there's major transitions taking place in the industry, and we really need to be aware of those and plan for those, because we can take advantage of them. It can be a benefit to our business. There are new breeds of applications, whether it's cloud-based services or whether it's this Internet of everything, of things talking to things. That is actually very exciting, and there's a big business opportunity coming out of that, and we need to consider that and understand that. The great thing is that our customers, especially our consumers, are desperate for this stuff, but they can't get enough of it. And the more that we do to understand these trends and enable a better experience for them and enable them to better personalize that experience, it's a good thing for us all. And that's a big opportunity. Back to the reference I was making about business and how we can help business move into using some of these things faster, because we are slightly behind here in Canada, especially compared to the US. Our employees in their personal life and us in our personal lives, we're way more productive than we are in business. We use all these things. We can enable that, especially in small business, to make them far more productive and add innovation. The great thing is, actually, we're doing a really good job in most areas. We're out there, we're leading edge, especially in our consumer business, and it's a really exciting, fun place to be at the moment. And this group, the ISPs, are probably some of the most innovative organisations we have in Canada, and we should be proud of that. Thank you for your time this morning. You're a valuable group of customers, and good to see you all.
Thank you, Mark.
Pardon?
Thank you. Maybe if there's a question, we have time for a question or two. If anybody has a quick question for Mark, anyone? Right over here.
Okay.
Please state your name.
You should know it by now. Jean-François Mézy. I'll bring up Snowden again. A lot of Cisco-type companies have great projections for future capacity and growth of internet usage and stuff. Is there a serious possibility that privacy issues may actually kill the cloud, and all of these machine-to-machine and the farmer stuff that you pointed out would actually stay within a LAN and not go to WAN, which would basically change? Would that change dramatically your projections if that happens, or?
I don't think. I think privacy and regulation are always areas that can slow growth. If we look through history, though, there's always a way that we find to navigate around these. It may slow it for a while, but I don't think it'll actually stop it. And we're pretty clever at working our ways through this. And I know, an example, not quite the same, but in the entertainment industry, providing TV. There's a lot of talk around cloud PVR services and copyright issues and issues around will that stop that industry or that type of service being developed around holding multiple copies and the content owners having issues around the rights. It's amazing if you look across the industry how we find our way through that stuff. So there is potential there, 100% agree, but ultimately I think we will find our way through that, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mark. See another hand. That was a very enlightening talk, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, no, sure.